The viewers, a very warm welcome. Good morning, listeners. Yeah, there is an echo on the line. You're listening to Ammar and Jaf. I think he's on his yacht or his jet or his limo, whichever one he is on this morning. We'll be bringing him to the studio, or wherever his studio is. Apparently, he's going to be 5 minutes late. But obviously, given the fact that it's 5 minutes past 10 already, let's see. Sun's shining makes an incredible difference. It is Friday, the 16th of February, and I'm delighted to share with you that we have an extraordinary guest joining us this very morning, a repeat guest, a regular supporter of show business on Spice FM, and the wonderful, magical Mr. Mark Patton will be joining us later on this morning. Mark, for those of you who are aware, is the Director of Education. He's responsible for education in Newcastle and Newcastle City Council, a wonderful supporter of ABC, and an all-round great guy. So Mark will be joining us later on in the show, and I always get rather excited whenever Mark does kindly afford us some time, because not only does he provide invaluable insights, also helps us learn a bit more as to what's going on. And for parents who are considering what to do next if their children are leaving school, there's always a healthy conversation and discussion around that, and more generally and more broadly on education and learning and such like. So yeah, we'll be hearing from Mr. Mark Patton. What else is going on? Well, politically, for those of you who are aware or not, there were a couple of by-elections taking place, two by-elections, one in Wellingborough and another somewhere else. And those by-elections have been won by Labour. And the story goes on that the turnaround, so the swing from the Tories, who had originally Conservatives party led by currently Mr. Rishi Sunak, has been turned around by a massive 28.5% swing from the Tories to Labour, the second largest swing from Tory to Labour at a by-election since the Second World War, saying that if the trend was replicated at a general election, the Tories would hold just 4 seats. The result is also the largest drop in Conservative vote share ever in a by-election, surpassing Christchurch in 1993. And for those of you who are familiar, surpassing the 8 defeats experienced by John Major between 92 and 97, which then led to Mr. Blair coming into power. So interesting times. Other things that in the news, there is a recession, and an official recession in the UK right now. So that means where there has been 2 quarters, 2 consistent quarters of contraction is what it is. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Ammar. Go ahead, Ammar. I'm listening to your briefing on the Chancellor's comments yesterday.
Yeah, no, I was highlighting the news, and the news is and was that the by-elections, Labour won the two by-elections, which is quite interesting, right? Um, the fact that they were Conservative seats, but I don't think necessarily they are a reflection on how the whole country would vote. Um,
Hmm.
and the reason why I say that is the one of the seats were surrounding both
Yeah.
both of the both of the seats were
Which areas?
surrounding extraordinary challenges. I think Peter Bourne was one of them who'd been kicked out of the Conservative Party, allegedly. I don't know, I need to check my facts. Stood independently, and there was a lot of controversy associated with him. So yeah, if you're looking at a localized approach, then if you're unhappy with something and someone, um, because they've allegedly done something wrong. Um, yeah, um, let's just see. Let me get my facts right. Wellingborough has a new MP after Labour's Jen Kitchen overturned 8,540 majority to take the seat from a Conservatives in a by-election. But what do the people at the town's railway station make of it? That's interesting, whether they live there or not. The poll in Northamptonshire constituency was prompted by a recall petition that forced Peter Bourne out of the seat he won in 2005. It was launched following an investigation into his alleged behaviour towards a staff member. Mr. Bourne's partner, Helen Harrison, stood for the Tories, coming second. So his wife or his partner stood. So if you have fallen out with um, the MP and he's allegedly done something wrong and is being deselected, uh, um, and it's funny because some of the statements here is what really killed me was that the bloke who got sacked, Peter Bourne, it was his partner who had the front to stand. Arrogance, contempt. Um, I would have voted independent if I didn't think it was a wasted vote.
So,
Is
so
what?
I'm sorry. Did Peter that won? Yes.
No, no, no. So Peter Bourne was an MP there. He was
Okay.
a Conservative MP,
Okay.
and he was deselected by the Conservative Party
Okay.
because of alleged wrongdoing. Um, and his partner stood as the Conservative representative. So she was then selected, which just sounds a bit as an outsider sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's like a conflict
so
of interest, is it not?
what?
Conflict of interest somewhere, I would have thought.
No, no. So according to bullying and sexual misconduct investigation, on 16th October 2023, the independent expert panel recommended that Bourne be suspended from the House of Commons after a report found he had committed many varied acts of bullying and one act of sexual misconduct against a male member of his staff.
Okay. And is this partner, when they say
Then,
partner, the partner a woman
so then
or
he gets deselected, and his partner, um, um, his partner, Peter, who is Helen Harrison, Peter Bourne's partner, standing in Wellingborough by election. Anyway, point is, Labour won, and I don't think it's a reflection of the whole country, but it's certainly a sign of the times. And talking about the recession, yeah, I mean, gosh, the amount of mixed economic messages I just find incredible. right? So last week, give you an example of the mixed messages. Nationwide increased their mortgage rates, right? And Santander reduced theirs
Mm.
because the Monetary Policy Committee was initially thought that there would be a reduction in interest rates. And actually, I think we need a reduction in interest rates. That's just my view, from a grassroots perspective. There's been two quarters of stagnation, i.e., there's been no or limited growth, and there's been a contraction of gross domestic product. And that's been blamed primarily on two things. One is retail was affected in December, and the second is construction, both impacted by around about 1%.
Mm.
And that's led to an overall declaration of recession.
Mm.
So we're officially in recession. As to whether or what that feels like, I suppose ultimately the basis of that is people are spending less.
Mm.
Having said all of that, inflation crept up last month, which is why there's all of these mixed messages. But it is so difficult to simply apply one lever that the Bank has of England to influence the economy, because now it would be a good time to reduce interest rates quite dramatically, because that would then put more money in people's pockets and then allow for people to spend it and contract, and do the opposite of the um, the recession. Anyway,
Can
we've
you
got
explain?
Mr. Mark
Sorry,
Patton. We've got
Ammar,
Mr.
just
Mark
one.
Patton joining us as well, Jaf,
Yeah,
shortly.
yeah,
To
yeah.
let you
Just
know.
one quick point though. Can you try and explain myself and the listeners so the interest rates? The idea is to put the interest rates to curb inflation. Is that right?
That's right. So you increase interest rates, which should um, impact broader influences on one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest issues, um, uh, is how much people have been getting paid versus how productive they are.
Mm-hmm. Because the interest rates if the interest rates go up, your mortgage prices go up. So your net money that you're left is less.
Yeah.
So you're spending less. So I'm just trying to figure out how, by spending less, that then reduces inflation.
Because inflation is the cost of products or prices just rising, continuously rising,
Based on demand. So
because
the demand drop.
people are prepared to pay for it.
Yeah. So if you've got lots of money in the bank, the demand is going to be higher. You're probably prepared. People, those suppliers will probably charge more.
Well, that's
And
all that's happening, isn't it? Everything. So what you're trying to do is curb the cost of products and services rather than them continuously rising, right? So you want people to stop spending as much, and that way people stop charging as much because the demand isn't there. Um, but it's interesting that the recession's just crept up on us just like that. There was never the last year or the year before, we all imagined that a recession would come on the back of COVID, right? You'd expect one
yeah.
financially and economically to exist. Having said that, no one
It's Red
really
Hot Radio.
had been there. Anyway, let's get Mr. Patton on the show. I don't know who's pushing that button, but it's all interesting. And for the benefit of our listeners, as Mr. Patton joins us, it's as I've mentioned, and I was introducing Mr. Patton earlier on. He is an incredible educational leader and a long-time supporter, and that the sites just get better and better behind you, Mr. Patton, is what they do. I was trying to think, is that like an angelic? It almost looks like a biblical type of sort of whatever you call those things around somebody who's holier than the
Halo,
holiest.
a biblical halo.
The halo. Anyway, the saint. Here you are. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Yeah.
Saint Patton.
Morning, Jaf. How are you
Good
this
morning.
morning?
How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Spring is busting out all over. It's warm,
Yeah.
the sun is shining, half term is looming. All is positive in the world.
But you're not on the banks of the Tyne, though.
No, I am sitting at home, working from home today. This is the first of two appearances on broadcasting for me today, which is very rare. It's like the red buses, you wait for them and two come along at once.
Wonderful. And obviously you're on the I'm not going to say this publicly, but obviously I am. You're on the best one, Mr. Patton. So tell us why are you on mainstream media or whatever it's called?
Well, I wouldn't quite say mainstream. I was very careful. I chose my words carefully there. So this afternoon, I am speaking with a local to the city organisation called the Elders Voice, which is a group of, you may know that the city has a group of official elders, men and women who in the past have given good service to the city, and are elected to the post of being an elder of the city because of their wisdom and experience and service. And they regularly host a radio program, a recorded radio program on a variety of topics. And they have asked me and a colleague I used to teach with to talk today about volunteering. So that's what I am doing at about 1 o'clock this afternoon to be broadcast in a week or two's time.
Wonderful. And the Elders Council has been around for a long time, both literally and figuratively, as well. I think it's a great organization, and it's something quite special within the city. I am familiar with both the Elders Council and the fact that they do a radio broadcast as well. I'm sure it's down in Crudders Park or somewhere like that. Where is that?
I don't know. It's all done on Zoom now, so a bit like this illustrious program this morning. It's done remotely, I think, just to make it easier for people to join, but also perhaps maybe to keep running costs down as well.
Yes. No, great, and thank you ever so much. Although we much more favour the in-person opportunities, Mark, and we'll have to rectify that certainly for the next one. So, for the benefit of our listeners and our viewers, Mark, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it?
So I'm Mark Patton. I have been the Assistant Director with responsibility for education and skills in the City Council now for almost, not quite, but almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in April since I took a post in Newcastle. And that means that I have responsibility and oversight for all things education and skills preparation for statutory school-aged children and young people up to the age of 18 or up to the age of 25 if they have an education, health and care plan. Why do I do it? Well, I think part of it's my background in teaching and education. I was a teacher for 20 years in secondary education in the Northeast. And why did I enter education? I think part of it was part of it was inspiring teachers when I was a young child. And part of it was seeing the difference that they made, not only to me, but my friends around me. And I actually liked what they do, or what they did at that time. So yeah, I think that's why I do what I do, to try and make things better for children and young people, and now increasingly families, to make the next steps or the next decisions they have to make as well informed as they can be, and also just to try and take away some of the barriers to learning that some of our children and young people and adults in the city often face through no fault of their own, often circumstance or whatever. So in a nutshell, that's who I am and what I do and why I do it.
Excellent.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. So Jaf's got a series of questions for you, Mark, around skills and what does the future look like, and should everyone be looking at what's the influence and impact of AI and WAI and all of those different things that are offered here regionally. But you know, I suppose there's before we get into that, um, uh, skills everywhere I go and every conversation I have seems to come back to skills, shortage of skills, getting the right people, hard and soft skills, shortage of people, you know, the even some of the controversy that exists in pretty much the mainstream media and things like that can almost have a thread back to skills and the fact that we have a shortage of skills and we've relied on migrants and things like that historically, and now we're trying to change some of that. And you know, there's I suppose skills are at the core of living and life, right? Um, and Newcastle, I suppose what I'd like to hear a little bit are the changes in the last 5 years. You know, a slight reflection, I think, would be quite interesting to put you on the spot on, you know, how things have changed, what have been the challenges, what have been the opportunities, and such like. So with your permission, Jaff, before you come back and say, how can I upskill my staff and make sure that I get the right people in the future as early as I can? Mark, I'll let you please reflect on that, if I may.
Okay. I think in terms of, you know, if I think about where the city was and where my role was when I arrived in Newcastle compared to now, there have been some significant changes in the last 5 years. I think I would point to changes in the way that the government, and by that I mean local as well as national, see the skills agenda, and crucially how they fund that skills agenda has undergone some changes. Some of them, in my personal view, not for the better. Some of them definitely, I think, have improved things. So a couple of examples of that. I think that the funding regime for skills for young people at 16 or 18 or 21 who've not had a particularly good experience at school or not had a particularly good experience with their first training provider or their first experience of employment, I think the funding available to help them to improve their skills and their qualifications is not great. There is lots of funding out there for employers and for training agencies to help people to get level 3 qualifications and above. Lots and lots of opportunities around that, which is great for that part of the workforce. And you know, that might be something we could talk about with Jaf in a few minutes. But I think if you are a person who doesn't have a great qualifications base, and qualifications aren't everything, we all know that, but everybody, I think, needs a secure skills base, and by that I mean and include those softer skills of working with people and some of those self skills that you need to have to engage and to be a part of the workforce and modern society, around being able to communicate clearly, being able to work on your own and independently where you can, being able to work securely as part of a team, being able to take instructions and orders and carry out those things, as well as using and thinking about and using your own initiative. But if you've not had a good foundation in developing those, either at school or in your first, as I said earlier, your first training or employment opportunities, the options for you to develop those are really quite thin on the ground. And in particular, if you leave school with low or no qualifications, or you didn't attend school for a whole variety of reasons and weren't part of that growth that you go through as part of the education process, not just in terms of learning things, science and French and RE, but learning to be with people and develop your sense of person and yourself. It's really hard to do that after 16 and after 18, because the funding's just not there to support programs. It's very thin on the ground. And I do worry about this cohort of those people in the city and beyond who really struggle to engage in opportunities like that, to help them to move forward and make that next step. So that'd be one kind of area I would see has changed and not for the better, I would say. In terms of qualifications, you as entrepreneurs and business people in the city will be aware that the government have made some pretty crucial decisions about levels of qualifications after school, and the kinds of qualifications that they think are important and important enough to fund. And I think some of those changes have been good. I think there's been a very clear focus on technical pathways and sectors, which is definitely what we need nationally, and actually what we're quite good at in many respects in the Northeast. But I think that's come at a price of some of the more vocational pathways, where again there is a definite need in the city and in the region, but also in the country. And I know some of the spaces that you both work in around the sectors involving direct work with people, hospitality and areas like that. It's training for those young people is really hard now. I think it's really difficult to find a way into that sector, which is helpful for them, which is more economically viable, I'm sorry to say, than taking benefits from the government. I think for some of the pathways, it actually is economically disadvantageous for people to engage in a training opportunity or engage in a job, because they will be worse off. And in a city where our child poverty levels are appalling and continue to be appalling, and the number and proportion of families who are living in financial poverty, fuel poverty, food poverty continues to be very high. We all of us, need to be looking at how we can lift those people out of those dire circumstances and try and help them to be self-sustaining, trying to help them to be reassured that actually there is a future in this city, there is a future in this region for them and their families, and all is not dark and gloomy and a struggle. But that's difficult at the moment.
Is that area, are they in bigger are they experiencing bigger issues than what they have done over the last few months and years, Mark?
I think it would be fair to say that. So if we compare, and I hate going back to COVID because COVID's in the past now, and we need to move on. But it was a significant milestone for us nationally in this country, and a very significant milestone for many of our families and the sectors in the city and beyond. So if you compare where families were before COVID and now, there is a distinctly worse picture for many of those now compared to then, for a whole host of reasons, some of which I've talked about. I've not mentioned, macro political things and macroeconomic things like inflation, which has been significant in the last 24 months in particular, with double-digit inflation impacting on all of us. But as is sadly often the case, impacting on those who don't have very much worse than others. And I'm not sure that we have appropriately recognised that nationally and put mitigations in place to try and help people to recover from that. So whilst inflation at the moment is what, 4%? Last year we were in double digits, and that does have a huge impact on those people who don't have very much anyway. Sorry, that's turned into a very gloomy part of the conversation.
Well, no, it does take you back, when you think that, in our region, when you go through the city centres and you go to the restaurants and you see the vibrancy, but then you sit and, after these conversations, you think about those at home who are kind of thinking about their next meal, which just feels very sad. And you just feel that, look, what can we do more as an individual, maybe as a city, to make sure that we grow collectively? And is there anything in place to help those in need? And I guess that's automatically where your thoughts go to.
And you're right, we're all human beings, and no human being likes to see another human being suffering. And none of us like to see, I would argue, above all else, children suffering and children's life opportunities and life chances being put in jeopardy through no fault of their own. Children are not the masters of their own destiny. They rely on the adults and the systems around them to help and support and nurture them and their ambitions. And that's really hard when the adults around them are often struggling themselves, either in the family or in the extended family or in the neighbourhood, in the streets, in the communities. If everybody is struggling, it's really hard to find those little gems, those glimmers of light, particularly for our children. And me being an educationist would say, and I think quite rightly and properly, I would say that our schools do a fantastic job there in nurturing and providing those places of safety and sanctuary and inspiration and aspiration, which often are missing for the other hours of the day when those children are not in school. So I think our schools do a good job. I think there are lots and lots of organisations in the city who do a fantastic job with very little resource. In the voluntary sector, some of our community organisations are just fantastic in what they do to try and help families and individuals to, yes, put food on the table in some circumstances, but also, just put clothes on people's backs and shoes on their feet and provide them with, the opportunity to travel for a job interview. There are lots and lots of organisations out there who try their best to help people. And there are lots of other bigger organisations and employers who, add add value to their local community, the social context in which they operate and they live and they draw from in terms of their workforce. But increasingly, it's not enough at the minute. It's not enough. Our poverty figures in the city, just coming closer to home, still continue to be amongst the worst in the country. And we're a core city.
What, worse than the UK, Mark?
Amongst the worst in the UK.
Terrible.
Our child poverty figures. There was a report yesterday. I don't know if you caught it from I think the North East Child Poverty Commission, again lamenting the fact that we haven't moved very far in terms of our poverty figures for children and families in a number of years, despite all of the good work that we all see. You will see it, Ammar, you will see it in the travels that you go on and the organisations that you work with. But it's not enough.
Mark, who is that on?
Pardon?
Who is that on? Who's responsible for that?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer. I think that there are multiple causes, but I wouldn't want to single any.
Let's say if I try and answer that differently, let's say that I'm in the city council and I'm the head of the city council, and that landed on my desk. Those figures landed on my desk, and I'm the leader of the council. I would take that upon myself, whether it was within my remit or not, because I would be in a...
And I think it's a great point, Jaf. And actually, Newcastle was one of the first to introduce a child poverty commission type, sort of as in, and I think everybody could do more. I think that's part of this, but it's also a combination of things. Look, no parent, no person responsible and sane would ever want a child to go without. As in full stop. If I'd seen someone, I would naturally give them something, as in, but the challenge is it's systemic. There's people working 2 or 3 jobs and still not having enough to pay for utilities, for food, and never mind being able to take the kids somewhere. They can't even afford to get on a bus to go to a free museum. That's part of the stark challenges, and Mark's right to highlight that COVID is past. But one thing COVID done and demonstrated so significantly was the divide between the haves and the have-nots, and how that extended during that period to the extent whereby, some of the stories, and this is what's so sad, isn't it? Like reading about something whilst other people are experiencing this. You're in a tower block, right? You've got 4 or 5 children with you, of varying ages. You're in a 2-bedroom flat. You've got nowhere else to go, and everybody's stuck in that flat. You're not getting paid. You've got limited resources. You're not allowed to go out. Living in that environment is so sad to think about, never mind to experience it. So and here's the crazy thing about it. And here, because when you say who's that on, Jaf, it's partially on the haves. It's partially on the haves, is what I would argue. Right? This isn't. It's dead natural for us to go, well, you know what? The councils and the government should just do more and give more. Where does that money come from? It comes from that person who's got 3 jobs, paying the national insurance and tax and whatever else, still not being left with enough to feed their children or put the lights on and in the extreme weathers that we've suffered. Imagine counter that with, oh my gosh, I've got a leak in my roof, or oh my gosh, my boiler's broken down, and oh my God, the one car that we share between us is broken down and we haven't got enough money to sort of fix any of those things. So we can't do anything. And then we question why mental health is so significant. Because the pressures that we live in, and actually these pressures are shared more openly as well, is part of it. Mark, have you got any good news?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Jeff, don't be asking those type of questions again.
I didn't even ask the question.
I'm about to start crying. That's what I'm about to do.
I mean, I think we need to create more regular spaces for this kind of conversation in our communities and in the circles that we work with. Because if we don't talk about a thing, we tend to forget about the thing because our lives are always busy. And I can speak for what the council does and what we do as a local authority to try and help those things. But I don't think we talk about it enough. I don't think we talk about it enough, across the city. But let's park that maybe for another day. But linked to it, I mentioned half term is looming in Newcastle next week, which provides an opportunity for families and for children to avail themselves of a whole host of free activities and paid activities. So a really wide range of things that are available for our children and young people to do during the next week when they're not in school. And the council pushes a lot of material out to help families to understand what's available. And those families who needed a little bit of help with food, particularly those families who've got children entitled to free school meals, our schools will be helping those families during the half term to put food on the table. But there are lots and lots of free activities in our public spaces, but also elsewhere. So positively, next week I think looks like being one of the best ones in terms of having a range of things that people can engage with and get out of that 2-bed flat or whatever it is, and get some fresh air at no cost other than expending a bit of leg energy to get on the bus where they can and come into not just the city centre but various places around Newcastle. I think something else to look forward to, this is, I mentioned at the top of the show today, this is spring, a time of renewal nationally, naturally, but also in the city. People are looking forward to the summer term and what's going to happen in education, particularly those families who've got children going to reception for the first time next year. National Offer Day is coming up in April, but more imminently, those families who've got children moving from primary into secondary schools in September of this year, their National Offer Day is a couple of weeks away on the 1st of March. So, a time of great excitement for our children to find out where they're going to be going to school in September of 2024. That's to be looked forward to, I think. And yeah, I think it's sometimes hard to keep balance in things. We've talked about a lot of gloomy things earlier in the conversation, but there are opportunities out there I think for our children and our young people. We need to be better at sharing them and communicating them so that they know about them, but we also need to be better at helping them to access them and giving them some support to do that. And I think,
and thank you for that. And I think thank you, Jack. Thank you, Mark. I think it's a very important point, right? As in, regardless of it being gloomy or depressing, I think it's absolutely critical that we have these type of conversations very openly. I mean, it just seems not right in this day and age that this is happening in places and spaces like Newcastle, and this isn't across any particular community, Jeff. This is affecting all communities. It's affecting sort of both ethnically diverse and whatever else. This isn't well, that particular community has more or less or whatever it is. It's affecting all of them. I think one of the points that I'd like to pick up, Mark, is your point. Schools do a great job, right? And in my experience, if I look back at my black and white days, so we'd gone, and I'm not about to go over this in any great depth, but we'd gone from being one of the most affluent families to then experiencing abject poverty. I remember constantly being hungry as a 7 and 8 year old, up all the way up until I was sort of 10, 11. I remember thinking, can I have more than one chapati, please? Type of thing. And us living in a 2-bedroom Tyneside flat where there was an outside toilet, and getting a bath once a week in a tin tub or whatever, and mum boiling the pans to do that. But that was just normal. I didn't know. I mean, other than when we went to aunties, uncles' houses, and noticed what they had and whatever else. Anyway, I also feel as if it was a different time more broadly as well. As in, gosh, we'd escape because we'd get out on the street and play all day and not come back in, and habits, beliefs, behaviors, the people and societies changed far more dramatically, and things like that. Priorities have changed as well. But school was school. And what I mean by that is you'd go to school to be educated. That was it. Right? Everything else happened outside. Social care. There was significant social care for those who needed, with the right funding, with the right support. Right? And however, since I became involved in schools and seen this firsthand, the social care elements and the social requirements of school teachers and schools themselves, it's almost shifted, arguably, to now being 50% social care to 50% education, but then being purely judged on education. And I think that's a real challenge. Children going to school, children entering reception classes in nappies and being unable to read or write, or going into year one. That's quite dramatic, isn't it? And I know we've touched on this previously.
You're right. The role of schools in this country has significantly changed in the last 2 or 3 decades, and you could argue quite coherently that that's a good thing, but you could also push back against that and say, actually, the job of schools is to educate and is not to be a substitute for care, or increasingly a substitute for health. And the responsibilities of the primary care networks, but also the public care networks. Now, personally, I think there's a kind of a halfway house and a combination that would work and probably should work. But I think at the moment, schools are expected to do an awful lot more than just teach children, and I'm going to be really simplistic here, how to read, write, and do sums. I think they're expected to do an awful lot more than that. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right model to be taking forwards. Now, people far cleverer and far more able and skilled than I am make those decisions in government centrally. But I do worry that that's one of the possible reasons why we're finding it so hard in this country at the moment to recruit teachers, because we do have a teacher recruitment crisis at all levels, but particularly at secondary. And that again, there's lots of research out there into why that's happened. But what's unavoidably true is it has happened. It is actually a thing. It is increasingly difficult to recruit people. But again, just to head towards the end of the show with more positive news. School is important, and going to school is important. And you and I, the three of us, have talked about that on a number of occasions over the last couple of years. And it's been a priority for the city to help those families who struggle to get their children to school to do that. But I can report this morning, I double checked my figures before coming on air, that if we compared last term, so the autumn term of 2023, with the autumn term of 2022, across the whole of the city, the average attendance at school increased for the first time in a couple of years. So in 2022, the average attendance across the whole city was 91.8%. And last term, it was 92.1. Now, that's 0.3 percentage points, which might not seem like a very big amount to you two gentlemen, but actually, when you consider there are tens of thousands of children in the city, even increasing the percentage point by 0.1 is a significant thing. It's
amazing.
I agree. I'm really proud of our schools and our families and all of the services that help us to be able to say that we have improved the attendance in our schools in the city, because without that, we would significantly again be putting at detriment the futures of our children. So I'm really pleased. That's my highlight of the day so far, when I worked that figure out.
Well done. And going back to Jaf's point. Jaf's point, right? Because equally, I suppose there's a question, and I always reflect on these questions, but what's in our gift, right? Going back to, these are the challenges, right? You can sit back and go, oh my gosh, isn't the world a horrible place, and whatever else. Or, Jaf and I could go out and reach out to 100 people and say, I'll tell you what we want you to do every single quarter is donate £100. Can we put it into a pot? Can it be, accessed? Can we give sort of families, children? Is that something that we could do within Newcastle? Because I imagine there's enough people out there who would who already give. All of us, Jaf and I, regularly give and things like that. But I'm just wondering, is there something else that we've got the gift of doing? And the one thing that is easy to do, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, you can argue, but is to sort of donate. And I think if there was the opportunity, so if there is on your travels, the opportunity to support people and support those in genuine need, I imagine that there'd be a will and a want to do something.
I agree.
ਅਸੀਂ ਖੁਦ ਨੂੰ ਤੇਰੇ ਲਈ ਬਦਲ ਲਿਆ, ਬਦਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇਥੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ
that's
ਤੂੰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਦਲ ਕੇ ਬਦਲੇ, ਨੀ ਤੇਰੀ
our
ਅਦਲ
show
ਬਦਲਨੇ ਮਾਰ,
coming to
ਨੀ
an
ਤੇਰੀ ਅਦਲ
abrupt
ਬਦਲਨੇ
end.
ਮਾਰ।
Mark, thank you
ਤੈਨੂੰ
ever
ਜਿੰਨਾ
so
ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ
much. Bear with me just a
ਜੀਓ ਨਾ
second.
ਕੱਲ
No, we're still here because we've still got a minute to finish our recording at least. So I think two things. I think we need to celebrate more those wins. I think it's dead easy to focus on, oh my gosh, the end of the world, and And actually all of us have our own challenges and pains and whatever else, right? They're just in a different context, is what they are. And that's not me being dismissive of anything or anyone. It's just recognizing everyone will sort of say, I've got my own challenges, and they have. So we need to respect those things. But secondly, if there's something that can be done meaningfully and sustainably as well, because the sustainability of any activity or action is equally important. Then I think we need to explore that. But then coming back to what's in our gift, well, partly what's in our gift is to encourage people to have a conversation.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Encourage people to have these type of conversations. I think that's in our gift. So it doesn't matter where you are, Jaf. You're a significant employer. You contribute, all of you and your staff and your team contribute meaningfully to the economy and things like that. But we don't know their circumstances. You may have people employed who only work part-time because they're trying to do some caring and they're trying to look after kids and they're trying to do all of these different type of things. So as an employer, I think having those type of conversations is an important start. And equally, being an advocate of good news is critical as well. So sharing, spreading that news, I think is really important. And using platforms like this.
I agree. I'm going to have to go because I've got a meeting.
No problem. Enjoy your half term. Thank you so much for coming
Have a
on.
lovely weekend.
Thank you. I think at our next chat, I'd be really interested in discussion about AI. Somebody mentioned AI this morning.
I did.
And AI in education.
And then Jaf asked that question, is what he done. And then it just went, anyway, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye. Bye.